Everyone, this year was unbelievably disappointing. I'll go as far as to say that it's almost downright horrendous. I know, it's a bit of a Captain Obvious move for me to say this, but even in a practical sense, we've had total failures and letdowns one after the next, especially when it comes to sequels. Due to these circumstances, I started getting a little bit skeptical but hopeful for one sequel to fight this deluge of mediocrity. Creed 2. A sequel to the first Creed movie, which took everybody's expectations by surprise because of how good it was, from the phenomenal acting by Michael B. Jordan and Sylvester Stallone, to the superb directing by Ryan Coogler, and even the insanely amazing action sequences and story. And that movie became not only one of the best movies of 2015, but one of the best boxing movies ever made. However, I do feel like that there's one query that needs to be asked immediately. Does this sequel match to the same level of amazement as the first Creed, or is it as disappointing as every other sequel that came out in 2018? Well, without further ado, let's talk about this movie, and let's get ready to rumble. So in this sequel, Michael B. Jordan and Sylvester Stallone surprise their roles once again as Adonis Creed and Rocky Balboa. Ever since his fight with Ricky Conlan that happened 3 years ago in the first movie, Adonis Creed has finally made a name for himself in the boxing industry, even winning his first title match as the World Heavyweight Champion. However, there was more bigger, tougher, and brutal competition in the form of Victor Drago, played by Florian Montaño, who was the son of Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, who then openly challenged Adonis Creed to a boxing match like no other. And then Adonis accepts the match for one very important reason. The reason being is because the situation that Adonis Creed is going through, as well as the characters of the Dragos, all have to deal with specific events of Rocky IV. And by the way, if you haven't seen Rocky IV, you should definitely do yourself a favor and watch Rocky IV, because I'm gonna spoil the heck out of Rocky IV. Apollo Creed, who was the father of Adonis Creed, was killed by the hands of Ivan Drago during a boxing match during the Cold War, leaving for Rocky Balboa after an insanely awesome training montage to beat Ivan Drago in his own home turf in Russia, not only to avenge his friend, but for the pride of the American people. Because of the death of his father at the hand of the Dragos, Adonis Creed is on full-on revenge mode and braces himself for the fight of his life against Victor Drago. So, what are my personal thoughts of Creed 2? Before I started watching the movie in the theater, I was thinking to myself, maybe it'll be as great, if not better, than the first Creed. Maybe it'll be like a Blade Runner 2049 situation. So, after having to watch the film, I would have to say this. This movie, shockingly enough, is not as great or as game-changing as the first Creed. However, there is one word to describe Creed 2. It is badass. Creed 2 is one of the most badass, emotional, gut-punching movies I have seen this year. Even for a movie that isn't as good as the first one, it is still a worthy successor. And I'll get to those minor drawbacks in a moment, but first, let's talk about the things that really make Creed 2 a spectacle to behold. First of all of the performances from every single person in the cast is amazing across the board. Michael B. Jordan is awesome in this film. I've been a fan of Michael B. Jordan ever since the first Creed and Chronicle, but his performance in this movie is so powerful and so captivating that it might as well almost surpass his performance in the first one. This is Michael B. Jordan's movie through and through. Not only does his performance work, but the writing of the character is what makes it better. Adonis Creed in this movie is not only having to deal with his inner demons, but is having to deal with multiple hardships in his life. One of them is having to sustain a healthy relationship between him and his wife, who is played by Tessa Thompson, who's also fantastic in this film. He also has to tackle these inner demons that just keep getting inside of his head over and over again. And all of the conflicts that happen in every which way and turn in his life is what really makes this character and even the story just relatable and emotional all at once. I don't think there's really anything else I can say about Sylvester Stallone's portrayal of Rocky Balboa. He still captures the essence of Rocky. He doesn't feel like he's just doing it for a paycheck. And even some of the friendly banter between Rocky Balboa and Adonis Creed are not only great, but emotional and dramatic, because Sylvester Stallone's performance in this movie is downright fantastic, to the point where you feel like every time he's having conversations with Adonis Creed, he just feels like a surrogate father figure to Adonis. And speaking of emotional and dramatic, the villains also have their fair share of that. Dolph Lundgren is back again as Ivan Drago, who we have seen in Rocky IV. Apart from his performance in Rocky IV, where he's basically meant to play this cartoonish, evil Russian bad guy, his morals and his situations and circumstances are incredibly better. And that is one thing I really admired about this movie. It made its villains awfully sympathetic. I understood what their motivations were, and I cared about them, mostly because they have so much on the line as the protagonists do. Ever since the critical loss that happened in Rocky IV, both Ivan Drago and his son are trying their best to not only redeem themselves, but to spread boxing pride to Russia. Yes, while they are the big bad guys of the piece, they still have a lot of things going on that impact their lives. And Florian Montanu, who plays Victor Drago, does a great job as well. This dude also has such screen presence that when you watch him on screen, he looks like an unstoppable monster. One of the things that I really liked about this movie is how the film manages to take certain aspects of certain Rocky movies and manage them appropriately. Like the first Creed movie, it does take certain aspects of the Rocky franchise, most notably Rocky III, and especially Rocky IV. But instead of implementing cheesiness to the film, this movie instead takes the characters from Rocky IV, and including the first Creed, and treats them with such respect and care by giving them not only motivations, dimensions, but character arcs. Are they cliched at points? Yeah, to some extent, and this mostly leads to one of my minor gripes about this movie. It does have some predictability in its screenplay. You know exactly what the beat of the movie is really gonna be, even before the movie starts. Now, while I found that okay, the tiny downside is that it really lacks the true element of surprise, unlike the first one. Whereas the first movie was made by Ryan Coogler, who really made something truly remarkable and in the spirit of Rocky, Steve Caple Jr., who is the director of this film, does the best that he can to develop characters and story elements and put it into a movie that, while you do see certain things coming from that point on, the end result is still a great movie. The action in this movie is not only ruthless, but extremely badass. It's not as artistically shot like that one boxing match in the first one where it basically all happened in one take, but it is still incredible regardless. By the time the movie went to the climactic end fight scene, my heart was beating rapidly over and over again, and my hands were clenching the armrest of the chairs, and I was like, oh god, what's gonna happen? And by the time it finished, the payoff is just tremendous. It couldn't have gone any better. If there's one tiny gripe I have with some of the fight scenes in this movie, it usually just happens once, and it's just a minor gripe I have. It's when one of the boxers was punching the camera, and the decision for the director to film it that way, it was a bit questioning, but it didn't ultimately bother me, nor did it add too much to ruin the experience. And also, I want to add, the score by Ludwig Göransson, who also did the score for Black Panther, and Venom. He redeems himself in this movie by making his score truly moving and impactful, especially parts towards the end, and even during that training montage. I had goosebumps during those sequences as the songs were playing. Overall, guys, while this movie is not as great as the first movie, Creed 2 is a truly incredible boxing film that you have to see right now. You have amazing performances across the board from the cast, truly emotional and dramatic elements used perfectly, sympathetic villains, amazing action sequences, an impactful score. Despite some minor gripes I have with this movie, along with the film having some predictability in its screenplay, I would have to give Creed 2 a 4.5 out of 5. Alright guys, so that is my review of Creed 2. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+. And also, if you would like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.